Welcome everyone to our weekly giving season session. Here at Donorbox, we love sharing practical, actionable learning resources to keep you on top of all that's going on in our rapidly growing nonprofit sector. And that's something that you'll take away from each week's 30-minute giving season session. You will leave each session with something you can do right away to help you with your giving season planning. By the way, I'm Jenna. I'm the nonprofit advocate here at Donorbox, and I'm joined by our fabulous fundraising coach, Kara, with a C, and senior content writer, Kara, with a K. They've got a really great session for you today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you guys.
Hi, all. I'm Kara. Like Jenna said, I'm the fundraising coach here at Donorbox, and I guess my niche or my professional expertise is in nonprofit fundraising. And Kara, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, I am Kara with a K. And my background is also, I have several years of experience with nonprofits, primarily on a communications team that also handled writing fundraising appeals and emails and social posts and all of that. So yeah, excited to be here today.
Kara is our communications specialist on our team.
Yeah, she's amazing. This is going to be a good one. Okay, I'm going to move right along for y'all. Here we go.
Well, welcome to Tuesday. Thank you for taking time to join us for this short session on getting you ready for giving season. And this week, we are going to tackle top 3 tips for appeal writing. There are many more tips, but we're going to tackle, Kara and I sat down and talked through what we think are our top 3 and hope that you might learn from them. I want to start, though, with asking, what is a fundraising appeal? And we asked this to a number of our organizations in a Donorbox community meetup several months ago. And there was a little confusion. And I will start with what it is not. What a fundraising appeal is not, it's not just your donation page. A fundraising appeal is not your donate button. Instead, a good fundraising appeal is an outbound ask or way to direct givers to your donation page, or direct givers to want to write a check and send it into your organization. And they're very special. They're very difficult to write. They can be difficult to write because they are a specialty. And a lot of times organizations approach fundraising appeals and writing fundraising appeals like they do everything else. They approach it logically and with reason, but fundraising appeals are really often not logical. And sometimes they don't make a lot of sense. They break design rules. They break some writing rules that you may have learned in school. And if you have an eye for graphic design, they might make you cringe just a little bit too. And so these best practices that we're going to share, and there are many more that we can go into, but these best practices are based on donor psychology. And so we're going to tackle our top 3. But first, we have a quiz for you. And Jenna, if you would launch this for us here in the session, let's go ahead and look at this. What do you personally think is the biggest fundraising appeal offense? Is it a letter that is impersonal or egocentric? So we do this and we do this and we are this. Is it B, no specific call to action or deadline, very open-ended, help, give hope, those kind of things, without being specific? Do you think it's too many stats or data within the copy? Or do you think it's D, unclear of how the donation will make an impact? What do you think is the biggest offense? All right, well, thank you. Thanks for voting. And I'm going to just let you know that that was a trick question, because the answer is all of the above. All of them are things that you want to be sure not to do within your fundraising appeal. And so what we are going to do instead is walk through our top 3 tips to help you avoid some of these offenses. So Kara, I'm going to turn this over to you, and we'll start with our top tip 1. And Kara, how do you personalize the donor experience? Will you share with us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So what do we mean when we say personalize the donor experience? Well, you want each person who receives your appeal to feel as if they are receiving a letter from a friend or a trusted contact, not from your organization. And if your donor feels that you are speaking directly to them, you'll actually have a much better chance at capturing that gift. So that's why it's really important to personalize the donor experience. But how? So for starters, would you begin a letter to your friend with "Hello, friend" or "Hello, donor"? I'm guessing not. I know I usually address my friends by name, right? So the first step to personalizing your appeal letter is by doing just that. Always address each recipient by name in the salutation. And I know this may seem, if you've never done this before, it may seem a little daunting, but printers are really helpful and they can really help you with what they call variable fields. And because you're having those addresses pulled, you should already have access to the names of your donors. And trust us, this works. It really does. Business Wire actually found that response rates increased by 135% when a recipient's name is added to the appeal letter. That's huge, 135%. So another way you can personalize the experience is you can also consider segmenting your appeal to fit each recipient. And this is something that I've personally seen success, and I know I've heard from several other sources that it's a great way to really get donors to feel connected and to give. So you can take a look at your donor's giving history as well as demographics, such as where they live or whether or not they're parents, age, things like that. So then you can actually group these donors into segments and create customized or personalized letters for each group that better targets what their interests may be, what their needs may be. For example, if some of your donors tend to give to a specific program of yours, like maybe you have a food pantry, or you give bikes to kids, or you have a rehab facility, you can target them with a story and ask that's direct, and we'll talk more about the ask later, right, Kara? And relate that directly to that program that those donors tend to be more interested in. So same goes for location. If you have a homeless shelter or or a dog shelter, things like that, consider targeting people in that direct area because they want to help, people or animals that are directly affected close to them. And with parents, they may respond better to stories coming from other parents because they can resonate with them. You can also personalize your ask amounts based on giving history.
And Kara, you mentioned a mailing, but email providers and things like that also allow you to put in that variable data, like the first name and custom fields too.
Exactly. You can do, and with those ask amounts, what's really great about that is you can even use variable fields with ask amounts. So you can base that off of, you can find their average gift amount and put that in there, and then suggest a couple of higher amounts too, some of those stretch gifts.
Thank you.
So next up is tip number 2, engage your readers. Now these kind of go hand in hand, but you want to make sure your appeal pulls your readers in and keeps them invested. Here are a few ways that you can do this. So for one, use donor-centered language. We kind of mentioned this in the poll question when Kara was saying we instead of you for that egocentric. So you want to use you as often as possible. Don't just talk about what your organization does. We help this and we accomplish that. Show your donors how your donors themselves can make a difference. You helped this child. You saved this dog's life. Things like that. You can still talk about your organization. It's going to come through. Just make sure there's a balance and that you're using that you language first. So number 2, remember who you are writing to. Likely someone who doesn't know your organization as well as your board members or staff, right? They probably don't know the ins and outs of all of your programs and the jargon that comes with your industry. So avoid all of those industry terms and make sure you're using concise sentences and simple words. This isn't the time to break out your dictionary and to, really try to make those complex sentences happen. That's not necessary. So 3, you want to share a thought-provoking beneficiary story to show impact instead of data. Again, this was another point on that poll question. Keep the numbers, like, I don't know, how many dogs you helped last year. Apparently, I really love dogs because I keep mentioning dogs in this presentation. So how many dogs you helped last year, or the success rate of your recovery program in your newsletters and annual reports. Like we said, you should definitely send them. They really show impact. Their place is just not in your appeal letter. In your appeal letter, you actually want to use storytelling to paint a picture of the difference donors' gifts have made for a real person, a real place, a real dog, maybe. So people give to people, not organizations. This is a big thing to remember. People want to help others. They don't want to feel like they're helping you meet a goal or, support your board, things like that. Speaking of dogs, there's a dog outside my window that just distracted me. And 4, throughout the letter, make use of bold and underlining to guide your readers through the story and keep them engaged. So this is kind of where that mess of formatting Kara mentioned earlier comes in. You're going to want to bold and underline the key parts of your story. So I always like to make sure when I read my bold parts of my appeal letters that they made up a story all on their own. So this makes it possible for those skimmers to get all of the main points, and maybe they'll even be engaged enough to go back and read the entire piece, because that's always the goal, right? So that brings us to our last tip. Kara, do you want to take this one?
Absolutely. And here is the big one. Make the asks. Sometimes we spend so much time writing and making sure that what we're writing is beautiful and readable that we forget that the reason we're writing is to ask for money. And I think sometimes that comes because we're a little uncomfortable too. And so just keep in mind that fundraising is an important part of any nonprofit. And here are a few things that will help you maybe get the courage to ask and ask well. So first, know that your work matters. And this is a big one. You're not only doing good, but you are making a real difference in the world. You really are. And remind yourself of this every day. The passion will come through your words and your actions, and your donors will notice it. Next, be confident in what you're asking for and why you're asking for it. And so the best way to do this is to research a little bit about your donors and what their interests are, and you've done some homework on what they care about and how it relates to your mission. Maybe the over and above, they support one of your programs more than another or something like that. That's a compelling reason for them to support your organization, and you can expand on that in your fundraising appeals. And then also remember that no is not forever, and no doesn't mean never. It just means not right now, and that's all. And if you know that your prospect can't give right now, you can ask them if they'd be interested in becoming a donor later on down the road or signing up to be a volunteer, and that is okay right now too. And then lastly, don't be afraid of rejection, because guess what? Even though no isn't forever, rejection can be. So just don't sweat it, and don't be afraid of it. And also just be yourself. The more comfortable you are and the more genuine you are, and the more confident people will feel donating. And also I will say, just make sure that the ask is very clear in your letter, as Kara was mentioning with the formatting and things like that. Make sure that if the only thing they read in what you've written, make sure it's the ask. So make sure it jumps out and it's very clear. Now, here is your weekly practical action. Every week, we've been leaving you with a practical action for the week. Your practical action for this week is to draft your fundraising appeal. Take some time to sit down and write it. and rewrite it so that you can perfect it in time for giving season. And it's a really great idea to ask others to read through it. And these others might be people who might fall into your target audience, friends or family, and ask them to read it through and give their opinion. Are you presenting, if you remember back several weeks ago, we talked about your case statement. Present the problem, present in your appeal letter somehow how you are uniquely positioned to solve it, and then how the donor can step in to help with that situation. And just ask your reader if those things are clear. So please take time to write, or your first draft at least, of your fundraising appeal.
So we have a couple of good questions here, and all the floor is yours for the next 10 minutes. You'd be amazed at how many questions we can tackle within that time. So please, if you've got any questions on your mind, you can drop them in the chat now, and we'll do our best to work through them. So top one from Catherine. I love this question. How long should the appeal be?
That's a great question. And it really depends, in my mind, on the channel. I guess I'll answer first, and then Kara, you could try. Sorry, I stepped on your toes.
Perfect.
I think it depends on the channel. Direct, if you're sending a direct mail letter, like we talked about last week, you have a little more liberty on the length. Actually, believe it or not, longer written appeals are more effective. So 2 pages, 3 pages. I stop at 2 when I write them. It's just a lot. But that long form piece is appropriate for a direct mail letter. Kara, do you want to chime in on email and social media? I know that that's an area of expertise for you.
Oh, yeah, of course. Sure. So definitely shorter. Obviously, we know with social media, there are limits on especially Twitter. But what's really great about the social posts is I actually recommend breaking them into multiple different posts across a day, especially on like Giving Tuesday. You can show a story unfold across the day, and that brings people back. So just those short little snippets of a story or little facts about your organization, those are pretty quick. Email, I try to keep those fairly short. They can be a little bit obviously longer than your social post. They can still read like a letter, but people are usually wanting to read emails pretty quick too. The biggest advice I have for email is actually not necessarily length, but make sure your first ask is above the fold, what we call, or which in a letter, or before you have to scroll, so that if someone just opens that email on their phone, they can click right away instead of having to scroll to find that call to action. So those are my biggest tips on that.
That sounds really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and thank you both. Next question we have is, and Catherine, you may need to elaborate. It says, are you referring to the organization's mailing list of past donors? Please share your experience with soliciting for new donors.
I think, and Catherine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're referring to when I mentioned pulling the names for mailing for the mailers and for the salutation, correct?
I think that sounds right, Kara.
I think that's right. So for that, in the past, I've used existing donor lists. So you can, if you have Donorbox Donorbox or whatever CRM you're using, you can go in and pull first name, last name, address, things like that, as well as their giving history. So you can see that data that we also talked about. And stay tuned. Pretty soon, we're about to release a reporting feature coming up. Exciting. So you'll get to see even more details. Can't tell you too much yet because I've been sworn to secrecy, but I'm excited. And then, but also in the past, and Kara, maybe you can speak to this a little more, but we've purchased lists. Sometimes that's the biggest way you can really get new donors to come into the fold, and in a cold way. But the way to do that is you can either use services or you can look at your existing donors and find maybe there's some zip codes that they tend to come from, or maybe you tend to have female versus male, or really define that target audience, and that'll help you purchase a better list than just throwing out, we'll take 1,000 addresses, please.
Yeah. And if, purchasing lists can be a little tricky. And so I think an organic way to do that is peer-to-peer fundraising too, is a good way to acquire and solicit new donors, is that social component there. So asking your more engaged volunteers and board members to invite 10 others to donate to a peer-to-peer campaign for them, for your organization through them. And so that might be a good way to do that. And definitely, when we talk about hot, warm, and cold donors that have given most recently are warmer than acquiring and soliciting a new donor, which is going to take more contacts and a little more energy and more money than starting with your more recent donors and moving backwards.
Okay, I like this question from Cecilia. Should the social media and email campaign take place at the same time as the direct letter appeal? That is a great question. That's it.
It's my very favorite thing is multi-channel campaigns, multi-channel appeals. So what I usually recommend is after the direct mail appeal hits mailboxes, and always make sure you put at least a couple of your staff members on the mailing list so you know when it hits. Then start, because you don't want to send an email reminder to your letter recipients if they haven't received the letter yet. But then start, a week or two later, send a reminder email based on that letter, and kind of expanding on the story with a video or things like that. Send a, if you're doing with the year-end campaign, make sure you're sending another email 3 days before the end of the year. Get those appeals in for your, just those tax credits, get them in. Things like that. Get those donations in, not appeals. And then the same with social media. You can run them all at the same time. And what's really great about that is you don't copy and paste, but you don't need to recreate the wheel every time. You can pull those powerful elements from your letter and just repurpose them for email and social, because that'll not only save you time, but it also reinforces that message with your donors in more ways.
Yeah, I often, the golden thread, you're weaving that golden thread. But if you look at retail, I feel like nonprofits can learn a lot by looking at retail. I think you've all heard me say this before, but if you look at a promotional campaign for one of your favorite department stores, you're going to see an ad on TV, and then you might see an ad, in the Sunday paper. You'll see an ad if you subscribe to their email posts. You'll see it on their social media. You'll know what promotion that they're running for a certain period of time. Your fundraising appeal, I picture them kind of in a 3-week, 4-week run between the time that direct mail letter hits, and you're still talking once or twice. You've syndicated that message through email and then reinforced it through social media posts so that people are hearing it multiple times, and you're giving them more than just one time to respond to you if they don't respond that first time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I see a question here from Elaine. I know we only have a couple minutes more. So Elaine has gone through Hurricane Fiona. So sorry to read that. Thank you for sharing with us. So how do you make an ask in times where it's urgent and there's disaster relief needed? What are your recommendations there?
My recommendation, social media is great for this. It is, it can tell the story with visual images very quickly, and then reinforce that message, kind of working backwards from what we just said, reinforce it with email campaigns too, and start with your warmest donors and work backwards. But, it sounds like maybe there might be some photographic images you can share that might be moving, storytelling, even just your own personal story there. losses and damages, no internet or electricity, but we're still, trying to deliver on our mission. We're still doing these things. Can you step in and fill this gap? But make sure that the ask is very clear, that you're asking for money at the special time for this emergency and what it's going to go to, clean up and rebuilding or whatever it is. That would be my suggestion. Kara, what do you think?
Yeah.
I would say the exact same thing and add crowdfunding campaigns are perfect for this. You can show your goal. You can also share updates within the campaign. People on Donorbox, people can subscribe to your crowdfunding campaign without even donating. So you can email them that way with updates and, hey, our first $10,000 went towards cleaning up XYZ. We still need, 15,000 more so that we can keep this work up. Yeah, I would definitely recommend crowdfunding.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to jump in and say,
I know. I was like, I had to jump in before Jenna because I think that's the only thing you love more than crowdfunding is peer-to-peer.
Yes, it's so true. Elaine, I'm assuming if you're here, you're a Donorbox user. I highly recommend using the crowdfunding feature and turning on your goal meter as well. So you create that sense of urgency and they can see you getting closer to your goal and maybe more compelled to donate. But thank you for being here amid all of this. We appreciate you. Can the longer appeal be a short letter and then a one-page attachment like an annual report?
I like to keep asks separate from reports. I think if you, in my mind, the more personal, if you wanted to do this approach, the more personal you can make it, the better. So even if you put a handwritten note on it, hey, Jenna, thanks for because you gave this impact happened, just wanted you to see this. Would you consider giving next, making your gift this year end or something? I could see that happening. What I think I might do in this approach, if you have the budget and the bandwidth to do it, is send the annual report out now with just a note of gratitude and then follow it up in a couple of weeks with an appeal, with an ask. That's how I would pace it. Kara, Jenna, thoughts?
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree there. I think this kind of takes care of a couple of things, not overwhelming with data, which a lot of annual reports can be. And annual reports also thank, and I don't think you should thank and ask in the same place. It should either be a thank or it should be an ask, in my opinion.
And I will say, I was at an organization that did something kind of similar. We did a letter on the front and then did some data on the back. And of my time there and many appeals sent out, I think it was one of our worst performing appeals. So just from experience, those strong letters, those strong stories work better. But like we said, definitely send that out because it's good to show impact, and thank, but definitely separate.
Absolutely. One more. So how would you recommend addressing a new donor whose name you do not know? Perhaps you didn't capture that in your CRM. Maybe they gave you cash or whatever that may be. How would you recommend addressing them?
That's hard. If you have, it probably depends on the channel. I think if it's an email, it can even be, hey there, I noticed that you gave and this, this happened. Thank you. And then I think I would ask, I would somehow have some sort of ask mechanism or response mechanism so you can collect that name. Even something very informal is, I'm almost, I'm sorry I have to say this, but I missed it. I didn't collect your name, and so I think just being open and honest, anytime you have an opportunity to be transparent, even with something silly as that, I think it gives you authenticity, makes you relatable because we all do that sometimes and do that. But if you truly sincerely don't know their name, then just leave off the personalization and just, a nice general, hey there, hope it's a great, week for you or something like that. Kara, what do you think?
Yeah.
Thoughts?
I agree. I think especially in email, it's a lot easier to just get away with the, hey there.
Yeah.
So how's it going? but hey there, and just follow it up in a letter. I never say never. So if you have to
say dear friend, or
yeah.
I think
Right.
If you have to, it's fine. It's not going to be the end of
but
the
if
world.
you have the names, you should definitely use them.
Yes.
Yep. And I think the same would go for potential donors. If you're reaching out to folks who have not yet donated and you may not know their name for one reason or another, I think you could probably navigate it the same way. But going back to lists, if you've purchased a list and you're soliciting for donations to potential donors, more than likely you're going to capture that information. You're going to get their name. So that kind of helps. I mean, just be as friendly, as personable as possible to make up for that, and make sure that you do get that information down the line so that you can nurture that relationship and make them feel like you know them.
Perfect.
So thank you all so much for your time. And
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.